Good afternoon, and welcome to an update edition of the Beal School Building Committee. My name is Jim Kane. I'm a member of the Board of Selectmen and serving as chairman of the Building Committee. With me is Sandy Fritz, member of the School Committee, Kevin Mizikar, town manager, Joe Sawyer, superintendent of schools, and Patrick, what's your last name?
Collins.
Yes, Patrick Collins. We've just met, you have to understand. Patrick Collins, the assistant superintendent for finance and operation. We're very close, very good friends. So once we get over that embarrassing moment, now let's move on to a sincere thanks from the building committee, and I'm sure the entire population of the school department as well, and town hall, for the overwhelming support of the Beal School question, which was on the ballot on November 6th and received well over 10,000 votes, a 2-to-1 margin, and I must admit I was pleasantly surprised. It was a great outcome. The more I talked to various people, the more everybody was telling me that they had bought onto the project early on in terms of the building having lived in a useful life for the community and provided a great number of decades of service. However, now that we've got the vote, now we have to perform and actually deliver a great building on project and on budget. So we'll see if we can't do that with greater than success than my ability to remember Patrick's last name. But I'm sure we will. So actually, Joe, anything you'd like to say?
I just want to also thank the community for this vote of confidence. I think that it speaks to the work that's been done over the past 2 decades in terms of building projects, and especially more recently, especially with the advent of the MSBA process. I think people have confidence in that, saw the value in partnering with the state and getting $34 million of grant funding from the state to help make this a reality. And I think that the quality of what has been presented through the building committee, a very thoughtful process, and I think that resonated both with town meeting as well as the general electorate. So, but we appreciate that confidence, and now, as you mentioned, Mr. Kane, it's our job now to deliver the best building we can at the most, that's the most cost-effective for the community and of the highest value. But I'm thrilled it's going to create a much better physical learning environment for our kindergarten through grade 4 students going forward for decades to come. So
And not just at the new school, but
no, across the board.
It'll allow the other schools to create some room. It'll give you some flexibility in programming across the system. I think it's a bit of a watershed moment, I think, for the system.
Absolutely.
It's a good thing. Well, Patrick, why don't we go through the critical milestones and where we stand today, and then a bit of the MSBA process.
Sure. So just a quick recap. This project's been in the pipeline for a while now, and we were back in December 2016. The feasibility study money was appropriated, and been working on that since that time, and got the town meeting approval. The MSBA, by the way, on Halloween did unanimously approve the project as proposed and to enter into a project scope and budget agreement with us, provided that the town election was positive. So that's where we are right now, and basically the chart with MSBA building process. As you know, we've used this chart frequently. It has 8 different modules or 8 different phases, and from start to finish, this is a 6.5 year venture from the very beginning to opening the doors for school children. So we're in module 6 right now, which is called detailed design, having secured the funding. And so we'll be working with our project management company, the architects, and soon the construction management company to complete out the design. So with respect to the building, selecting the construction manager at risk company, the building committee, as you know, selected a subcommittee of folks to work on that. I'm part of that subcommittee, along with John Masiello, Aaron Boucher, Bob Cox, and of course our project management team. And so we have 3 companies. We had 8 actually applicants, and we're down to 3. Fontaine Brothers, who built the most recent addition to the town library and renovation. Gil Bain Company, which built Sherwood Middle School, and then Shawmut Construction out of Boston. So all of them have lots of good, positive experience with building public school buildings in Massachusetts through the MSBA process. So we'll bring a recommendation to the full building committee on December 11th, I believe, for approval.
Well, great. As we enter the detailed design phase and move through construction, now we have a variety of other moving parts to take care of. As people may remember, the governor signed a bill over the summer that allows the town to acquire the Glavin proper piece where the buildings are on either side of Lake Street. And now that the local voters have supported the project, we'll now start that more technical and slightly mind-numbing process of going through the DCAM disposition process. We've done a whole bunch of those steps over the past year or two, but now that the legislation was written in such a way as that DCAM could move it to the town when the vote was taken. So I don't think they have done some of the work, not knowing if it would be, frankly, supported or not. So now we're in a full-bore sprint marathon with them to get everything up and rolling so that we can take ownership of it during the first quarter of 19. I think all of the issues have been identified. So Kevin, why don't you talk about what you're working with them on now, what Kristen's been doing. Our own internal team has done most of the survey.
Yep.
And there's still many, many moving parts to make this happen.
Sure. So first and foremost, we presented deeds to DCAM for them to review. And state lands are unique beasts because there's been many iterations of the state government that control the ownership of land throughout history, late 1700s, 1800s, which this piece of property has gone through many state owners. So we're trying to clear title. Anytime you're going to make any investment on property, you want to make sure that your ownership is clear. So we've been working on that. We're actually finalizing the survey work, for those deeds. We will be looking to partner with Shrewsbury Youth Soccer and getting some easements from them to allow access from the surrounding neighborhoods directly onto the adjoining property and then over to the school. We're really pushing, having the state move within, 3 or 4 months to sell a piece of property is quite a task. So we've been focused on that. We'll be meeting later actually early next week on a budding landowner to make sure that we have drainage easements and other things like that. So we've been very busy, and then we're also getting ready to have contracts ready for signature with the construction management firm that we will be hiring after the subcommittee makes their recommendation, and we do those interviews. So that's a very detailed document. I think over the last few days, it's taken up about 50% of our time in the office. Town council's involved, and the owner's project manager, and trying to figure out every situation could go wrong and account for it in the contract, so we're well protected. And it's a very unique project because given the changes among all the schools, it's not like we could say, well, let's just wait till Columbus Day weekend or Thanksgiving or Christmas break or winter break next year, and then we'll move in during that vacation period. This is really a go or no go during a long-term summer period. So we have to make sure the contract documents are in good order, and we'll be there, and we'll get a great contractor on board. And since we're doing all this work up front, we'll never have to worry about it, but we'll make sure we're in a good spot.
It's an interesting point because Sherwood was Sherwood, right? Build the school 100 feet, move the children 100 feet, move everything else, and it's golden. And it was a one school for one school function. This is now one large elementary school that will impact others, and it won't be something that'll be quite as simple as that effort was. One of the aspects of this project that you spent a considerable time on in the office and then at town meeting was the financing. Can you walk people through where you are with that?
Sure. So we are actually submitting our financial disclosure to be prepared to enter the bond market and get some short-term notes. It'll be about $6.5 million, and that'll be enough capital to get us beyond the position where we understand what the guaranteed maximum price is, which is the figure that the construction manager will have to put forth. And then we'll kind of make a real-time decision sometime in the spring when we're going to borrow, what's the interest, what's the market doing as far as the interest rate goes. So at the Board of Selectmen's December 11th meeting, there'll actually be bond anticipation notes ready for the board to sign. We'll have been out to the market and put those in place, and we'll also use those short-term notes in the end to say, well, we don't need this amount of money, or because we saved all our contingency like we hope to do. So That'll be the pocket of money that we have the most discretion over, and the rest will be all long-term financing.
So on December 5th, the construction manager at risk subcommittee gets together and will have a final all-afternoon set of interviews.
That's right.
A recommendation will be made on December 11th to the building committee, and the building committee will vote one way or another. It will then be up to you to go to that person and finalize a contract. If things go smoothly, when are you seeing, by the end of 18 or into 19, January-ish, when we have somebody on board?
Yeah, I would think it'd be the first part of January that we'll get someone on board, and that's still really early in the process.
Yeah.
You know, we won't even to be technically to 60% or roughly beyond 60% design, and that gives us the opportunity to have the person or team in the room that's actually going to be responsible for doing the work that's being drawn on paper and saying, well, you know, that chase doesn't line up with this piece and we can't construct that like the architect envisions, or just being a real partner and saying, no, we can do it a lot cheaper if we move this pillar to there because it's not going to impact the HVA system in this way. So, yeah, we're excited to get them on board in January.
I always use a simple analogy that under the traditional sense, the town sits on this side of the table and the contractor sits on that side. Under this, allegedly, we're all sitting as we are on one side of the table, and you never really know that until you're in closeout, but hopefully that will work again. And the reason it's so important, though, to get them on in January is so that they can play a constructive role and frankly remove their own excuses for change orders or what have you. Because what looks great on a draftsman board or on a computer with CAD, it doesn't always play into constructability. And, you know, allegedly under this model, they'll be playing that role, and hopefully they will. We certainly found that with Gilbane at Sherwood, and I wasn't close to that, frankly, but I was a tad closer. But I think the example in the library worked out very well, particularly where you were marrying a brand-new building to an old building. So the reason we're kind of focused on this first quarter is we want to acquire the land from DCAM ASAP and get a very broadly written license agreement so we can be on the property doing what we need to do, almost as if we own it, because we want that contract to be able to take advantage of early spring and possibly break it up into different packages, as some say, whether we do the road first to eliminate that safety issue, or exactly what elements we get into. Patrick, anything else you want to hire at the, expand on the construction manager at risk?
No, I would just say, you know, we have 3 very qualified companies, and it's going to be, you know, a hard decision to make, but as you mentioned, we'll be conducting very thorough interviews, and we've received a lot of quality information about their project management team, which is kind of a key factor. You know, they have to propose to us the actual individuals whom they will have managing this project from start to finish, and who they're going to have on site and what their qualifications are. So we're excited about learning a little bit more about that in early December.
It's good.
And I think Kevin raised a really good point that I wasn't really thinking of. When we opened Sherwood, the students literally walked from the old school to the new school and opened it that day, where this one really has to, the timing and how everything falls has to be pretty precise to make sure that everything's going to be ready to open. And
Not just the school.
that's right.
And the deadline is, you know, we're trying to put ourselves in the best position. So we're saying that building has to be constructed and turned over to the town no later than June 30th. So then we have to move, you know, people and furniture and all those things and be ready.
And all
for
the
this.
other schools have some degree of impact.
Right, and there'll be some work that not only the district administration will have to do in conjunction with all the elementary principals and the various teams across the district. School committee will have to do some work and give us some guidance in the coming couple of years relative to, we'll have some proposals ultimately about how we're going to make that all work. And we need to draw population away from each school. Our intent will be to engage with the demographer, and we've got to figure out the timing of when this would happen, because we're going to have to, for the first time since 1997, redraw boundary lines for elementary attendance, because we're going to be, some neighborhoods will feed to the new school, other neighborhoods will remain, feeding to the school they've been at for the last 20 plus years, but there could even be some shifts, from school to school. It may not be the new school, it could be, depending on where those neighborhoods. The good news is that there are a lot more tools to help with that now with GIS systems and we're not only looking at, because as we talked with the community about when we were proposing this project, this is not only for students who exist today, but we have to do our best to project out where students are going to be in terms of future growth and that sort of piece. Actually, I thought it was interesting when you had seen that you had been at a presentation some time ago in terms of some of the factors that go into predicting where students are going to be.
Yeah, and the two key factors are looking at our general population. This is why we need a demographer, and looking at females of child rearing age and where they live, and also at the other end of the spectrum, looking at single households with one person living over the age of 65, because those homes will turn over, and then that's where we'll get the school children. And those two key factors, the latter one, it was purported, knowing where those single person residents live in a larger home, and that home is going to flip, the impact on the school children enrollment is purportedly more with that population than it is with apartment building construction. And so that's really why we need to engage some experts and consultants. And as you mentioned, the geographic information systems now that we didn't have back then, the ability to map and show all of this stuff visually, just by moving boundary lines, and what the impact is will be a great communication tool for the community. And so we're excited about getting some consultants to help with that process, and take our time to do it right. And it's not only the school children, but also our staff. We have lots of staff planning to conduct, and who'll be moving to the new building, and certainly some hiring of new staff, but it impacts every aspect of our operation. So it is going to be a kind of a watershed moment, as you mentioned.
And just as the school committee, I thought was extremely transparent and open, and solicited a lot of feedback relative to the decision whether to make this a K1 or a K4 building. I expect we'll undertake a similar process around all this work, because we need to make sure that people understand what's happening, and that there's a lot of clarity around what information we're using and what recommendations, and ultimately what decision the school committee will be making relative to those boundary lines.
Absolutely. And I think this whole process needs to be transparent from beginning to end, and getting feedback from the community helps, because maybe we're too close to it at times, and maybe having some other opinions or ideas come in are always beneficial.
You're right. Well, what to do with the Beal School? We have heard from Joe that although it's a formal school committee vote at some point in the future, you didn't have a future desire to remain at Beal. The town doesn't have a desire to remain at Beal. So in 2017, the Board of Selectmen appointed the Beal Reuse Study Committee to get some ideas fleshed out in advance of the vote, because I think we owed it to the community to have, if you will, almost bookends of, well, if you go here, then what? And the committee heard a variety of ideas, from knock it down and make a parking lot was probably one extreme at one end, to make housing out of it, to put it out to the private sector and see what will come of it. Personally, I hope that's the recommendation coming from them, because the building is, I think it's a unique piece of history in town, but just to achieve the basic seismic coding and everything else to make it a building that's up to basic code is so expensive. So I think if you put it out to the crafty developer who might use a historic tax credit program or some other way of financing it and making it work, wonderful. But ultimately, the committee will re-engage, I suspect, closer to a reasonable time frame from the completion of the new building and the move out of the existing building. We'll have to see exactly how that plays out. Excuse me. One thing that I know would be requested or desirable is, if folks have an idea, they should write the office. Mo DiPaolo, my colleague, is chairing that committee. You can drop him a letter or an email to the Board of Selectmen, and I know he'll continue to collect Oh, this is great. I can give you his exact, this is good. M. DePaulo, MDEPALO, @shrewsburyma.gov. I know Mo has been continually taking ideas from people as he sees them at Dunkin' Donuts or wherever else that might be around town. Joe, why don't you speak about the name of the school? There was never a thought in my mind that we would ever change it, and I think only one gentleman had a unique idea of a possible different name, but I think given Major Beal's accomplishments, moving the school is a fitting tie to not only Major Beal as an individual and of his accomplishments, but also a unique tie back to World War I.
Sure. And that, there have been just a couple of questions, and someone had asked me, well, will it be named after, will it be Glavin, or will it be Lake Street School, or whatever, and that had been our assumption, but at some point, we'll ask the school committee to formalize this, and we presented information last week to the school committee. We did provide some additional information about Major Beal, and certainly it's my recommendation, our recommendation as an administrative team, that the school retain its name. For those who aren't as familiar, Major Howard W. Beal, he was in the early 20th century a Shrewsbury resident. He had attended Harvard Medical School. He is actually practicing as a surgeon at Memorial Hospital in Worcester, very successful physician. And when World War I had broken out, prior to the United States entering the war, he actually served in the Red Cross in England, running a Red Cross hospital. Mr. Perna, Michael Perna, the town historian, shared with me actually, and we'll love to get some copies of these as we go move some of these things forward. But on the historical aspect, there was a newspaper piece and a photograph where I believe it was Queen Mary at the time had visited that hospital and commended Major Beal on the work that was being done there. And then my understanding is that he had actually taken ill, had come back to the States to recover, and in the interim, the United States joined the war effort, and he enlisted in the Army, and what was then called the Army Medical Corps, and ended up in charge of running a hospital in France, where he had done some excellent work, and ultimately, unfortunately, was gravely wounded and killed, died a couple of days later from his wounds in July of 1918. But in terms of the importance of not only historically commemorating Major Beal's contributions and sacrifice, but to make sure that our students are able to make that connection in an appropriate way. And there's already, at the last building committee meeting, we talked a little bit with the architect around the idea of having some opportunity in the main foyer, or however it's designed, to have some artifacts, either, I know that you, Mr. Kane, assigned a subcommittee to do some work around things that are in the existing building that we may want to bring with us, and other ways that we can use photographs or other ways to indicate, so people have a sense of the history and the legacy that the school honors through the name. And really the change would be moving from calling it an early childhood center, as it is now, to being called Major Howard W. Beal School, and consistent with the names of our other elementary schools. And that's something that I'm sure the school committee will undertake in the near future.
It's a fascinating story of all of the gentlemen who are at our World War I monument, but Major Beal in particular. If you figure back in that time, he went to what, Phillips, Exeter?
Either or Andover, which one or the other.
Phillips Academy,
Yeah.
and then on to Harvard. And it's very difficult today with everything being so formalized and government-based to think that the medical services for so much of early World War I was all based on volunteers from around the world going over and serving. It's hard to believe. But it is a remarkable story, and I'm glad that we're keeping with this, because it's also particularly, as people know, my grandfather served in World War I. Moira's grandpa served in World War I. So that several of us have this almost odd connection to World War I and an affinity for the history of it. And I think it's a great tie, given that we're 100 years post, so that the children never forget that very unique instance in our history. And to that end, we did appoint a subcommittee, Chris Girardi, the building principal, Mike Perner, town historian, and Bob Cox, superintendent of public buildings, soon to be emeritus, correct, right, when he retires. But the three of them are going to go through the building, inventory everything, because there's a unique mural on the second floor. There's a great relief, is that correct, Patrick? A
That's
relief
right.
as you walk in the building.
Yep.
there's some other features that we want to figure out how, whether we do an offset as they've done at the library with some of this, or it's going to be a unique way to tie it back together. And I know that these three folks will do a great job of pulling it together, and then I'm sure with our architect and how great they do, I think just about anything they touch, they'll figure out how to respectfully and tie it into a bit of the history curriculum for children who attend. And Joe has this great picture of Howard Beal. I didn't see this when we were doing the monument. I never saw a picture of him. This is a
Yeah, I
fantastic
think it
picture.
was off the, there's a Phillips Academy publication that it popped up online. And
Yeah, it's great.
I know Mr. Perna has some interesting documents. He shared it with me. I'd love to see it again. A book that apparently a friend of Major Beal's widow was able to, sometime in the early 20th century, publish a volume of all the letters he had sent to his wife when he was in Europe during the war. And it's remarkable to see those firsthand accounts of what he was experiencing there, from the mundane to things that were just horrifying in terms of his very clinical description of the first soldiers who came in who had suffered gas attacks, and to see things that from your general history knowledge to be described by someone who was there in a firsthand account is really remarkable. And we'll try to find some ways to connect our older students to some of this work as well through our high school history classes. And the more we can make that history, make that local connection, I think makes a difference for our students as well as those who are interested in the community.
It does. It's a great, I think it says something about Shrewsbury that we're not simply moving ahead without remembering from whence we came. So you must be pretty pleased, a member of the school committee, a new building a few years ago, a new building right away. You guys must be
I think
thrilled.
we're good, yeah.
I think it's going to be able to, no, but it'll relieve some of those other
Absolutely.
pressures. Hannah and I hadn't even passed in our house when we, 20 years ago, I guess it was. Is that when Floral opened?
Just 21 years ago. Yeah.
Okay, 21. Boy, time flies.
Yes.
So we went to see this school that our children someday would go into, and we saw all these specialty rooms. And then as each child arrived,
Less special.
that wasn't a specialty room,
gone.
that's a classroom, that's this room. So it'll make a big difference
It's
to be
true.
able to draw those rooms off, draw those children into a place where they can all then get a real day of art and what have you. So I think it's a bit of a watershed moment for the system.
Right, and on all my
Great
years on the school committee, we're constantly dealing with space issues.
Yes.
It's been a long time, so it's gonna be nice to see eventually be able to
yeah.
take back some of those rooms.
I hope so. That'll be it.
A lot of design work to do, though, still left in this committee. A lot of work
certainly
to
is.
do, a lot of systems, a lot of finishes, all those things that we'll be looking to keep our eye on the budget and bringing back up at all the committee meetings. So we've got to encourage our loyal viewers not to shy away.
No. We'll be back.
meeting, monthly, if not more, to really work out all those hard details of the school now to bring it all to fruition with their support and direction.
We're very fortunate that we have Sherwood just a few years ago.
Yes.
So we know what worked, what Bob Cox isn't too pleased with, what he would have done differently, and we still have a chance to correct some of those. We know, but some of the stuff he thought worked well, it's wearing perfectly. He's already got some ideas of what running some tiling another 2 feet higher, I think it is, which is a great little detail to know. And this is the time to get it all on the table.
That's
So,
right.
well, thank you for coming by this afternoon. And thank you for watching, and once again, thank you for your support at the polls on November 6th, and we hope to deliver to you a great building. So thank you very much, and have a great day.